I'm Ione Merritt, 26. Until 3 months ago, I believed family meant having someone in your corner, no matter what. Then my parents invited my cheating ex-boyfriend to move into my childhood bedroom while I slept on friends' couches. And everything I thought I knew about loyalty crumbled. The betrayal cut deeper than Ezra's infidelity ever could. My mother's words still echo. We need to hold space for everyone's truth, honey. Growth requires compassion. What she didn't know was that I had been financially supporting Ezra's art for 2 years, paying his studio rent while he found himself. I'd been the one calling my parents every week, bridging the gap between his world and theirs. But when I needed them most, they chose his comfort over my heartbreak. How do you rebuild your life when the people who raised you to believe in justice become the ones denying it to you? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning everything fell apart started like any other Tuesday, in my parents' Berkeley Hills home. Coffee brewing in the French press Dad insisted made the most philosophically sound cup. Mom doing her sunrise yoga on the deck while chanting something about releasing yesterday's energy. I was visiting for the week, sleeping in my old room while apartment hunting. A 26-year-old with an MFA and a relationship that felt increasingly like performance art I didn't understand. Ezra had been distant for months, claiming he needed creative space to work on his latest series about emotional authenticity in modern relationships. The irony wasn't lost on me, even then. I'd been paying for that creative space, literally. His studio rent, art supplies, even the organic groceries he insisted fueled his inspiration. Not that I minded. I believed in his talent, in us, in the life we were supposedly building together. The house smelled like sage and disappointment that morning, though I couldn't yet name the latter. Mom emerged from her meditation session glowing with the particular radiance of someone who'd just solved all the world's problems through 40 minutes of strategic breathing. "Darling," she said, floating into the kitchen where I sat nursing, my second cup of coffee and scrolling through rental listings on my laptop. I had the most incredible insight during my practice today. About boundaries and love languages, and how we create space for authentic connection. This was Ione Merritt in her natural habitat. My mother, the life coach who turned every conversation into a teachable moment. She'd built a thriving practice helping Bay Area professionals optimize their emotional intelligence, which mostly meant charging $200 an hour to tell overworked tech executives to communicate their feelings. The fact that she seemed incapable of simply saying, "Good morning," without launching into therapeutic speak had become background noise in our family. "That's nice, Mom," I said, not looking up from a promising 2-bedroom in Oakland that I definitely couldn't afford alone. "No, really, it's about you and Ezra." She settled into the chair across from me, cradling her own mug of what looked like pond water, but was probably some adaptogenic blend she'd discovered in her wellness circle. "I think you've been operating from a place of scarcity rather than abundance in your relationship." I finally looked up. "What does that mean?" "Well, you've been trying so hard to be the good girlfriend. You know, supporting his art, giving him space, managing his emotional needs, that you've forgotten to create space for your own authentic expression." There it was, the casual way. She could diagnose my entire existence over morning coffee, reducing 2 years of love and support to a psychological deficiency on my part. It should have been a red flag that she was already psychoanalyzing my relationship before I'd even mentioned having problems. But this was Mom. She psychoanalyzed the mailman if he seemed energetically dysregulated. "I don't think I'm trying to be anything," I said carefully. "I think I'm just being myself." "But that's exactly the issue, sweetheart. You've been so focused on being who you think Ezra needs you to be that you've lost touch with who Ione actually is. When was the last time you did something purely for your own joy?" Before I could answer, because honestly I couldn't remember, Dad wandered in wearing his usual uniform of rumpled corduroy and existential fatigue. Professor Cass Merritt taught sociology at UC Berkeley, and had the particular look of someone who'd spent 40 years thinking too hard about human behavior without actually engaging with it. "Morning, kiddo," he said, barely glancing my way as he began his elaborate coffee ritual. Dad didn't just make coffee, he performed coffee, grinding beans with the precision of someone conducting a scientific experiment. "Your father and I were just discussing the importance of individual identity within intimate partnerships," Mom announced, as if this were a normal continuation of their breakfast conversation, rather than her projecting her theories onto my life. "Were we?" Dad asked mildly, measuring water with a small scale. "I thought we were discussing whether to refinish the deck this summer." "Same concept, different application," Mom said without missing a beat. "Creating beautiful spaces requires understanding what each element contributes to the whole. I loved my parents, truly, deeply loved them. But conversations in our house had always felt like being trapped in a very expensive therapy session, where I was simultaneously the client and the unpaid research assistant. They'd raised me on a steady diet of emotional vocabulary and conflict resolution techniques, turning every childhood disagreement into an opportunity for growth and authentic communication. The irony was that I'd become incredibly good at managing other people's emotions while completely losing track of my own. I could facilitate a productive conversation between anyone, translate feelings into acceptable language, and smooth over conflicts before they became uncomfortable. I was the family's emotional Switzerland, neutral, helpful, and utterly invisible. "How are things with Ezra, anyway?" Dad asked, finally looking up from his coffee creation. "Haven't seen him around lately." "He's been busy with his work," I said, which was technically true. Ezra was always busy with his work, even when his work seemed to consist primarily of long conversations about creative process and strategic Instagram posts of his paint-covered hands. "That's wonderful," Mom said. "Artists need that kind of focused intensity to access their authentic voice. It's so important that you're giving him the space to explore his creative truth." Creative truth. Everything in my family's vocabulary eventually circled back to someone's truth, as if there were multiple versions of reality floating around, and the goal was to honor all of them equally. It was exhausting. "Maybe we should have him over for dinner soon," Dad suggested. "I'd love to hear about his latest project." "Actually," I said, closing my laptop, "I think we might need to talk about some things first. Ezra and I mean. We've been having some communication challenges." The way their faces shifted, Dad's mild interest sharpening into academic curiosity, Mom's therapeutic radar activating, should have warned me. In my family, communication challenges weren't problems to be solved. They were fascinating case studies to be analyzed. "Oh, honey," Mom said, leaning forward with the particular intensity she reserved for breakthrough moments. "This is actually perfect timing. I've been developing a new framework for navigating relationship transitions, and it sounds like you and Ezra might be in exactly the kind of growth phase that could benefit from some conscious restructuring." "I don't think we need restructuring," I said. "I think we need honesty." "Well, yes, but honesty without skillful communication can be incredibly damaging," Mom continued. "What matters is creating a container where both people feel safe to express their authentic needs without blame or judgment." This was my mother's superpower and my deepest frustration. Her ability to take any human experience and transform it into a workshop module. She meant well. I knew she meant well. But it was impossible to have a genuine emotional moment in her presence without it becoming a case study in optimal relationship dynamics. "Maybe," I said, "but sometimes honesty just means admitting that something isn't working." "Everything is always working, darling," Mom said, with the serene confidence of someone who'd never had her heart broken by someone she'd trusted completely. "It's just working toward a different outcome than we initially imagined." Dad nodded thoughtfully, as if she'd just revealed some profound sociological insight rather than spouted expensive nonsense. "Your mother's right. Most relationship conflicts stem from misaligned expectations rather than incompatible values." I stared at them. These two people who'd raised me, who'd taught me to believe in justice and kindness and standing up for what's right, and felt a familiar hollowness. They could theorize about love all day long, but they'd never learned how to simply sit with someone's pain without trying to fix it, optimize it, or transform it into a learning opportunity. The kitchen fell quiet, except for the gentle hum of Dad's coffee machine and the distant sound of Mom's meditation playlist still drifting from the deck. I looked around at the space that had shaped me. Walls covered with inspirational quotes, in beautiful calligraphy, shelves lined with books about conscious communication and mindful parenting, a refrigerator door decorated with photos of our family at various workshops and retreats designed to optimize our emotional well-being. It was a beautiful life, really, a privileged life. But sitting there, surrounded by all the tools for perfect relationships, I felt more alone than I had in years. I should probably get going, I said, standing up. I have some apartment viewings this afternoon. Oh, wonderful. Mom brightened. Are you finally ready to create your own sacred space? I think living independently again will be so good for your personal growth journey. As if moving out of my childhood home at 26 were some kind of spiritual quest rather than basic adulting. But this was how everything got reframed in my family. Practical decisions became opportunities for self-actualization. Emotional struggles became growth phases, and heartbreak became a chance to restructure your relationship with love itself. I kissed them both goodbye and grabbed my keys, already feeling lighter as I headed toward the door. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of eucalyptus and possibility. I had 3 apartment viewings lined up, a coffee date, with my best friend Vita afterward, and for the first time in months, I felt like I might actually know what I wanted. The first apartment was a disaster. A converted garage in someone's backyard that smelled like cat litter and broken dreams. The second was better, but way over my budget. A sunny 1-bedroom in North Berkeley that would have been perfect if I were a tech executive rather than a freelance writer with student loans. But the third apartment made my heart skip. It was a small studio, above a bookstore in downtown Berkeley, with huge windows and built-in shelves, and a Murphy bed that folded into the wall. The woman showing it to me was probably in her 60s, with silver hair and paint-stained overalls, and the kind of direct gaze that made me stand up straighter. "I'm Lenny," she said, shaking my hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. "I own the bookstore downstairs and this place upstairs. You're looking for somewhere to write, I'm guessing. How did you know?" "You've got that look. Hungry, but patient. Plus, you spent more time looking at the bookshelves than the kitchen." She walked over to the windows and pushed one open, letting in the sounds of downtown Berkeley. Traffic and conversation and the distant strumming of someone's guitar. Rent's reasonable because it's not fancy, but it's quiet after 9 and the light is good all day. "What do you write?" "Stories, mostly. I'm working on a novel." I hadn't said that out loud in months. Hadn't even admitted to myself that the half-finished manuscript on my laptop was still something I cared about. Good. Writers need their own space. Can't create anything real when you're worried about making other people comfortable. She handed me a business card. "Think about it, but don't think too long. Good spaces go fast, and something tells me you're ready to stop waiting for permission to live your life." I walked out of there feeling like I'd just had my first honest conversation in months. No analysis, no therapeutic reframing, just a straightforward exchange between two people who understood that sometimes you need a room of your own before you can figure out who you are. I was supposed to meet Vita at a coffee shop in Oakland, but I was early, so I sat in my car and called Ezra. We hadn't talked in 3 days, which wasn't unusual lately, but I wanted to tell him about the apartment, about the possibility of us having a real conversation about what we both wanted. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. "Hey," he said, and something in his voice made my stomach drop. Not the usual distracted artist voice, but something careful and strange. "Hey, yourself. I just looked at this amazing apartment, and I wanted to... Ione, we need to talk." 4 words. That's all it took to transform a day full of possibility into the beginning of the end. The thing about betrayal is that it arrives wearing the mask of honesty. Ezra's voice on the phone carried that particular tone of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation, who'd convinced himself that brutal truth was a form of kindness. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he began, and I could hear traffic in the background, which meant he was outside, probably walking, probably avoiding his studio where we'd spent so many hours planning our future together. "Okay," I said, gripping my phone tighter. "That's good. I've been thinking too. I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me, because I want to be completely transparent about where I am emotionally. Completely transparent." He might as well have said he was about to destroy my life with optimal communication skills. "Ezra, you're scaring me. At the retreat last month, the one in Mendocino, something happened with Sage, from the collective. Sage. I knew Sage. Tall, ethereal, the kind of woman who wore vintage kimonos and talked about her art like it was channeled directly from the universe. I'd met her at several gallery openings, had even complimented her work because I believed in supporting other artists, because I was a good girlfriend who encouraged her boyfriend's creative community. "Something happened," I repeated, my voice sounding strange and far away. "We connected on this really deep level, and one night we were talking about authenticity in art and how most people are too afraid to really be vulnerable, and it felt like this moment of pure truth. Like the universe was showing us something about ourselves. The universe. He was using the universe to explain why he'd cheated on me. Are you telling me you slept with her? I'm telling you that we had this incredible experience of authentic intimacy, and I realized that what you and I have been calling love might actually be codependency, like we've been enabling each other's patterns instead of encouraging each other's growth." I sat in my car outside the coffee shop where I was supposed to meet Vita, watching people walk by living their normal Tuesday lives, and felt reality tilt sideways. He was psychoanalyzing our relationship while confessing to infidelity. He was using my mother's language. "So you cheated on me because our relationship was codependent." I made a choice to explore a connection that felt authentic and transformative. And yes, that meant being intimate with someone else. But I want you to understand that it wasn't about you not being enough. It was about me realizing that I've been living in scarcity instead of abundance. Scarcity instead of abundance. Mom's exact words from that morning. "Have you been talking to my mother?" A pause. "Ellie and I have had some really meaningful conversations." "About relationship dynamics, yeah. She's helped me understand a lot about my attachment patterns." Ellie. He called her Ellie now, not Mrs. Merritt or Eleanor. They'd had meaningful conversations about relationship dynamics while I was paying his rent and believing in our future. "How long has this been going on?" "With Sage." Time doesn't really matter when you're talking about soul connections, but we've been exploring what this means for about 3 weeks. 3 weeks. He'd been exploring soul connections for 3 weeks, while I'd been planning our lives together. While I'd been in my childhood bedroom telling my parents how much I loved him. While I'd been transferring money to his account so he could afford groceries. "And you're telling me now because I want to be authentic with you. I think we should take some time apart so we can both figure out what we really want. I'm going to be staying with Sage for a while so you don't have to worry about my lease or anything." My lease. He was moving in with the woman he'd cheated on me with, and he wanted me to know I didn't have to worry about his financial obligations anymore. 2 years of support, and he was worried I might feel burdened by his rent. I can't believe this is happening. I know it's a lot to process, but I really think this could be a gift for both of us. Like maybe we needed this disruption to break out of our patterns and discover who we really are as individuals. A gift. My boyfriend cheating on me was a gift. "I have to go," I said. "Ione, wait. I want you to know that I care about you so much, and I hope we can stay connected through this transition. Maybe we could even explore what it means to love each other in a different way. I have to go," I repeated, and hung up. I sat in my car for I don't know how long, staring at nothing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. 2 years. 2 years of believing in us, of supporting his dreams, of introducing him to my family and friends, of planning a future that had apparently been an illusion all along. My phone buzzed with a text from Vita. "Where are you? Coffee's getting cold." I walked into the cafe on autopilot, found Vida at our usual table by the window, and sat down without saying anything. "Whoa," she said, looking at my face. "What happened?" Vida Hellstrom was everything my family wasn't. Direct, uncomplicated, and utterly incapable of turning personal disasters into learning opportunities. She was a tattoo artist with bright pink hair and the kind of loyalty that felt like a warm blanket. We'd been friends since college, and she was the only person I knew who could handle emotional crisis without trying to optimize it. "Ezra cheated on me," I said, and started crying. "That piece of shit," she said immediately, which was exactly what I needed to hear. Not an analysis of his emotional patterns or a meditation on the complexity of human relationships. Just pure, uncomplicated outrage on my behalf. I told her everything about Sage and the retreat and the soul connections and the meaningful conversations with my mother. I told her about the rent money and the grocery money and the way he'd made our entire relationship sound like a psychological disorder he'd finally gotten treatment for. "I'm going to murder him," Vida said calmly, stirring her coffee. "Like, literally murder him. I know people who could make it look like an accident." "You don't know people who could make it look like an accident. You'd be surprised what tattoo artists know about making things disappear." She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "But seriously, I'm so sorry this happened to you. And I'm sorry it happened in the most pretentious way possible. The worst part is that he sounded exactly like my mom, like he'd been studying her therapy speak and decided to break up with me using optimal communication techniques. Because he probably has been. Jesus, Ione, your family is going to lose their minds when they find out what happened." I hadn't even thought about that yet. About having to tell my parents that their daughter's relationship had imploded. About having to watch Mom analyze the situation, and Dad theorize about it, and both of them trying to turn my heartbreak into a workshop on conscious uncoupling. "I should call them," I said. "You should come stay with me tonight," Vida said. "Give yourself some time to process this before you have to deal with their unique approach to emotional support. I can't just hide at your place forever. You're not hiding. You're taking space to figure out what you need. There's a difference. Taking space to figure out what I needed." It sounded so simple when Vida said it, without any therapeutic jargon or spiritual bypassing, just practical, human kindness. We sat there for another hour, and Vida let me cry and rage and process without trying to fix anything. She bought me ridiculous amounts of cake and told me stories about other people's ex-boyfriends who'd met horrible fates, and by the time we left, I felt like I might actually survive this. But I still had to tell my parents. I drove back to Berkeley as the sun was setting, practicing different versions of the conversation in my head. No matter how I imagined it, I couldn't picture them just being angry on my behalf. They would want to understand Ezra's perspective, to explore what this meant for everyone's growth, to create a container for all the complicated feelings involved. The house was warm and bright when I walked in, smelling like whatever elaborate dinner Mom had spent the afternoon preparing. They were both in the kitchen, Dad reading at the table, Mom stirring something on the stove, and they looked up at me with the same expectant smiles they'd worn since I was a child coming home from school. "How were the apartment viewings?" Mom asked. "Actually, I need to talk to you both about something." They looked at each other. That quick parental communication that happens in microseconds. And Dad closed his book while Mom turned off the burner. "Of course, sweetheart," Mom said. "Let's sit down." We gathered around the kitchen table where I'd done homework and eaten birthday cake and had countless family meetings about everything from chores to college choices. It felt surreal to be sitting there about to tell them that my life had just exploded. Ezra and I broke up today, I said, because there was no good way to ease into it. Oh, honey, Mom said immediately. What happened? He cheated on me. In that art retreat last month, with someone from his collective. The silence that followed was loaded with everything I'd expected. Dad's analytical processing, Mom's therapeutic radar activating, both of them trying to figure out how to respond in the most emotionally intelligent way possible. I'm so sorry, Dad said finally. That must have been devastating to hear. It was. It is. How are you feeling about it? Mom asked, which was such a mom question that I almost smiled despite everything. Heartbroken, angry, confused. He used all this spiritual language to explain it, like cheating on me was some kind of enlightened choice. That sounds really difficult, Mom said carefully. It can be so painful when someone we love makes choices that hurt us, especially when they frame those choices in ways that feel invalidating. She was being careful, I realized. Too careful. This wasn't how she usually talked. She was holding something back. Mom, what is it? Another look passed between my parents and my stomach dropped. Ezra called us this afternoon, Dad said. He wanted to talk about what happened. He what? He was really concerned about you, Mom said quickly. He wanted to make sure you had support during this transition. And he was hoping we might be able to help him understand how to handle this situation with the most compassion for everyone involved. I stared at them. He called you to get advice on how to break up with me. He called because he cares about you, Mom said. I know that might be hard to believe right now, but I actually think it shows a lot of emotional maturity that he reached out to people who love you. Emotional maturity. My cheating ex-boyfriend had shown emotional maturity by calling my parents for relationship advice. Did you know? Before he called me? The pause was enough of an answer. He wanted our perspective on how to approach the conversation, Dad said. We encouraged him to be honest with you, but also to be mindful of how much pain this would cause. You knew he was going to break up with me, and you didn't tell me. We couldn't betray his confidence, Mom said, but we also wanted to make sure you knew that we're here for you, no matter what happens. I felt something crack open inside my chest, not just heartbreak, but something deeper and more fundamental. They had known. They had known that my boyfriend was about to destroy my life, and they had chosen to protect his feelings over mine. I need some air, I said, standing up. Ione, wait, Mom called. Let's talk about this. I think there's a lot we could explore together about healthy communication during relationship transitions. But I was already walking toward the door, already grabbing my keys, already understanding that I couldn't stay in that house another minute. Outside, the night was cool and clear, and I could see stars above the Berkeley Hills. I sat in my car and called Vita. I'm coming over, I said when she answered. Thank God. I was worried you were going to try to handle this alone. They knew Vita. My parents knew he was going to break up with me, and they didn't tell me. What the hell is wrong? With your family? It was a good question, and as I drove toward Oakland and Vita's apartment, I realized I might be about to find out just how deep the wrongness went. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Vita's apartment was a one-bedroom sanctuary of controlled chaos, tattoo sketches covering every wall, plants growing in impossible places, and the kind of comfortable clutter that comes from actually living your life instead of staging it. She answered the door in paint-splattered pajamas, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug that smelled like lavender and rebellion. Okay, she said, leading me to her couch and wrapping me in a blanket that was probably older than both of us. Tell me exactly what those emotional vampires said to you. They knew he was going to break up with me, and they didn't warn me because they didn't want to betray his confidence. Are you fucking kidding me? Vita's outrage was immediate and pure, like clean water after drinking poison. Their own daughter's boyfriend calls to ask for breakup advice, and they think their loyalty should be to him? Apparently, he showed emotional maturity by reaching out to them. Emotional maturity would have been not cheating on you in the first place. She disappeared into her kitchen and returned with a bottle of wine and 2 mismatched glasses. Okay, we're getting drunk, and then we're making a plan. I don't need a plan. I just need to figure out how to survive this. Those are the same thing. She poured generous glasses of wine and handed me one. Survival is always a plan. We drank and talked until well past midnight. Vida let me rage about Ezra's spiritual bypassing and my parents' therapeutic overreach without trying to find the silver lining or the growth opportunity. She just listened and got angry with me and told me I deserved better, which was exactly what I needed to hear. You can stay here as long as you want, she said, as we were getting ready for bed. I mean it. The couch pulls out, and I've got extra everything. You don't have to go back there until you're ready. I can't crash on your couch indefinitely. Why not? It's my couch and my decision. Besides, you do the same for me. She was right. I would. I'd done it before, actually, when she'd had her own relationship disaster 2 years ago. But somehow it felt different when I was the one needing rescue. I'd always been the helper, the fixer, the one who smoothed things over. Being the one who needed help felt like admitting failure. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Vida swearing at something in the kitchen. My phone had 17 missed calls from my parents and twice as many text messages, all variations on, "Please come home so we can talk about this," and "We love you and want to work through this together." Your phone's been buzzing all morning, Vida called from the kitchen. Want me to throw it in the garbage disposal? Tempting, but I should probably face this eventually. Should and want to are different things. You could just let them worry. For a while. Might be good for them. I scrolled through the messages, each one more therapeutic than the last. Mom had sent me links to articles about navigating relationship transitions with grace and finding empowerment through authentic communication. Dad had forwarded a research paper about attachment styles and conflict resolution. They were trying to help in the only way they knew how, but it felt like being offered meditation techniques while drowning. I think I need to go back and get my stuff, I said finally. Want backup? You'd come with me? Ione, I would walk into a burning building for you. Your parents' house is nothing compared to that. We drove to Berkeley in Vida's ancient Honda Civic, which had more character than reliability but got us there in one piece. The house looked exactly the same as it had 12 hours ago, but walking up the front path felt like approaching foreign territory. Mom opened the door before we could knock, her face bright with relief and therapeutic optimism. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so glad you're here. I've been thinking about everything all night, and I have some insights about healthy boundary setting during emotional transitions that I think could really help us navigate this together. Hi, Mrs. Merritt, Vida said with the kind of polite smile that could cut glass. I'm just here to help Ione collect her things. Of course, Vida, come in. Can I make you some tea? I have this wonderful adaptogenic blend that's supposed to help with stress, and I just need to pack, I interrupted. I'll be staying with Vida for a while. The hurt that flashed across Mom's face was genuine, which somehow made everything worse. She meant well. She always meant well. But her version of love felt like being smothered with good intentions. Dad appeared in the hallway, looking like he'd spent the night reading journal articles about family communication patterns. Ione, I'm glad you're here. I think there are some important conversations we should have about boundaries and family loyalty. I think those conversations should have happened before you decided to counsel my ex-boyfriend on how to break up with me. That's not what happened, Mom said quickly. We were trying to help both of you navigate a difficult situation with as much compassion as possible. Compassion for who? Vida asked, and I loved her for it. Because from where I'm standing, It looks like you showed a lot of compassion for the guy who cheated on your daughter, and zero compassion for your daughter herself." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents weren't used to being challenged directly. Their social circle was full of people who spoke in therapeutic euphemisms and avoided direct confrontation at all costs. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Dad said finally. "Our concern was always for Ione's well-being." "Then why didn't you tell me he was planning to break up with me?" "Because we believed it was his responsibility to have that conversation with you directly. We didn't want to interfere with your relationship dynamics. But you were already interfering by giving him advice. We were offering support to someone. We care about who was struggling with a difficult decision. Someone they cared about. Not their daughter's boyfriend, not someone who'd betrayed me, but someone they cared about." The casual way Dad said it made my stomach turn. "How long have you been talking to him about our relationship?" Another pause. Another exchanged look. "Ezra reached out a few weeks ago because he was feeling confused about some patterns he'd noticed in your dynamic together," Mom said carefully. "He wanted to understand how to approach those concerns in a way that would be constructive rather than hurtful. A few weeks ago. Right around the time he'd started cheating on me with Sage. So while he was sleeping with someone else, he was also getting relationship counseling from my parents about how to break up with me more effectively." "That's not," Mom started. "That's exactly what happened," I said. "He was having an affair and consulting you about how to manage me through the aftermath." "We didn't know about Sage," Dad said. "He told us he was questioning the relationship, not that he was involved with someone else." "Did you ask?" "That wasn't our business." "But my relationship was your business? My feelings were your business? My entire future was apparently your business. But whether he was cheating on me wasn't?" I could see them trying to find the therapeutic language to explain their choices, the careful words that would make their betrayal sound like wisdom. But Vida was there, and her presence reminded me that normal people didn't need to spin betrayal into a growth opportunity. "I'm going to pack my things," I said. My childhood bedroom felt like a museum exhibit of someone else's life. Posters from college, books I'd read in high school, photos of me and Ezra from happier times when I'd believed we were building something real together. I started throwing clothes into a suitcase while Vida sat on my bed and provided commentary on my parents' behavior that was both hilarious and validating. "I can't believe they're trying to make this about healthy communication," she said. "Like, your boyfriend cheated on you with their full knowledge, and they're acting like you're the one with boundary issues. They don't see it that way. In their world, everyone's truth is equally valid, and the goal is always to find the most compassionate response to everyone's needs. Whose needs were they considering when they decided not to tell you what was happening?" It was a good question. I'd been so trained to see my parents' choices through the lens of their therapeutic framework that I'd never asked whose needs were actually being prioritized. Ezra's, I guess, and their own. They didn't want to be in the middle of conflict. Right. So they chose his comfort and their own convenience over your right to know what was happening in your own relationship. Hearing it put so simply was like stepping outside after hours in a stuffy room. Yes, that was exactly what had happened. I was folding my laptop bag when my phone rang. Ezra's name flashed on the screen, and my first instinct was to answer. 2 years of conditioning don't disappear overnight. "Don't you dare," Vida said, reaching for the phone. No, you should probably not. You don't owe him anything." But I answered anyway, because some habits are harder to break than others. "Ione, thank God. I've been so worried about you." "Have you?" "Yes. I know yesterday was incredibly difficult, and I want to make sure you're processing everything in a healthy way. Even now, even after everything, he was managing my emotional response to his betrayal. "I'm fine, Ezra. Are you staying with your parents? Because I think it might be really healing for you to have their support right now." Their support. As if he didn't know exactly how they'd responded. As if he hadn't orchestrated the whole thing. "Actually, I'm staying with Vida." "Oh," a pause. "Is that wise?" I mean, Vita cares about you, but she might not be the most objective perspective on this situation. Objective perspective. He wanted me to process his betrayal objectively. She's objective enough to think that cheating on someone is wrong, I said. Ione, I know you're hurt, and I understand why this feels like betrayal. But I really hope we can move beyond blame and shame towards something more constructive. Move beyond blame and shame. I was supposed to move beyond blaming him for cheating. On me. I have to go, I said. Wait. I actually wanted to ask you something. My lease is up next week, and Sage's place is pretty small. Your parents mentioned that you were probably going to be moving out anyway to start your independent living journey. And I was wondering if I could maybe stay in your room for a few weeks while I figure out my next step. The world tilted. You want to move into my childhood bedroom, just temporarily. Your parents said they'd be happy to have me, and it would really help me transition to this next phase of my life without having to worry about housing stress. Your parents said they'd be happy to have me. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice getting louder. You cheated on me, broke up with me, and now you want to move into my parents' house. I know it might seem strange, but I think it could actually be really healing for all of us. Like, we could practice conscious uncoupling in a supportive environment. Conscious uncoupling. In my childhood bedroom, with my parents serving him organic meals and asking about his art. Are you out of your fucking mind? Ione, I understand that you're processing a lot of anger right now, but I hung up and immediately called my parents. Hi, sweetheart. Mom answered on the first ring. How are you doing with everything? Did you invite Ezra to move into my room? Silence. We thought it might be a good opportunity for healing, she said finally, for everyone involved. You invited the man who cheated on me to move into my childhood bedroom. We invited someone we care about to stay with us during a difficult transition. Ezra is family to us, and we believe in supporting people through their growth phases. Family. He was family to them, and I was... What? A difficult daughter who couldn't handle her emotions maturely? If he moves into that house, I will never speak to you again, I said. Sweetheart, I think you're reacting from a place of pain rather than wisdom. Maybe we could all sit down together and... I hung up and looked at Vita, who was staring at me with an expression of pure disbelief. They're going to let him move in, I said. No, they are not. They think it would be healing for everyone involved. Vita stood up from my bed with the kind of purpose that meant someone was about to get yelled at. Over my dead body, she said, and walked out of my room. I heard voices in the hallway. Vita's clear and sharp, my parents confused and defensive. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Someone was finally telling my parents exactly what their choices had cost. When she came back, her face was flushed with righteous anger. I told them, she said. I told them that if they let him move in here, they're choosing a cheating manipulator over their own daughter, and that you deserve parents who will protect you instead of analyzing you. What did they say? Your mom said I don't understand the complexity of the situation, and your dad said they're trying to model unconditional love. Unconditional love. For everyone except me, apparently. I finished packing in silence, trying not to look at the photos of our family vacations and my high school graduation and all the evidence of a life that had felt secure until yesterday. When we walked out of that house, I knew I might not be welcome back. But as we drove away, Vita's spare key heavy in my pocket and my entire life packed into 2 suitcases, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The possibility of choosing myself for once. You're going to be okay, Vita said as we pulled into her driveway. I don't feel okay. That's because you're not okay yet, but you will be. And you're going to be better than okay because you're finally free to figure out who you are when you're not managing everyone else's feelings. It sounded impossible, but it also sounded like exactly what I needed to find out. Living at Vita's felt like learning to breathe again. Her apartment didn't require emotional labor. Dishes could sit in the sink without becoming a meditation on mindful living. Conversations could end without group processing, and nobody analyzed my feelings before I'd even figured out what they were. But 3 weeks in, I was struggling. Not with Vida. She was perfect, giving me space when I needed it, and distraction when I didn't. I was struggling with the growing certainty that my parents had chosen Ezra over me, and the equally devastating realization that I wasn't sure I knew who I was without someone else's emotional needs to manage. I'd been checking their social media obsessively, which was masochistic but irresistible. Mom posted daily insights about holding space for difficult emotions and practicing radical acceptance during family transitions. Dad shared articles about conscious communication and the importance of maintaining compassion during conflict. Neither of them mentioned having a daughter, but Ezra's Instagram was the real knife twist. He'd been posting photos from my parents' house, sitting at their kitchen table with his coffee and sketchbook, reading on the deck where I used to do homework, even sleeping in my bed with its pale blue walls and the window that looked out over the Berkeley Hills. The captions were worse than the photos. Grateful for this sanctuary during a time of transformation, and sometimes healing requires us to release old patterns and embrace new ways of loving. He was living my life with my parents' blessing, and I was sleeping on a pull-out couch feeling like I'd been erased. "You need to stop torturing yourself," Vida said, finding me scrolling through his posts for the 3rd time that morning. "Give me your phone." "I can't help it. It's like watching a car accident in slow motion." "It's not a car accident. It's a choice your parents made, and continuing to watch it isn't going to change anything." She was right, but rightness didn't. "Make it easier." I handed over my phone and tried to focus on the freelance writing project I'd been pretending to work on for the past week. But concentration felt impossible when my entire family structure had been reorganized around my absence. "What if they're right?" I said suddenly. "About what?" "About me being too emotional, too reactive. What if I am processing this in an unhealthy way?" Vida set down her coffee and gave me the look she reserved for special occasions of spectacular bullshit. "Ione, you found out your boyfriend was cheating on you. Your parents knew and didn't tell you, and then they invited him to move into your childhood bedroom. Being upset about that isn't unhealthy processing. It's called having normal human emotions. But maybe I should be able to handle it more maturely. Maybe I should be working toward forgiveness and understanding instead of just being angry." Says who? Says everyone? My whole life I've been taught that anger is just fear wearing a mask, that healthy people process difficult emotions and move toward compassion. And how's that working out for you? I thought about it honestly. My commitment to emotional maturity had gotten me a boyfriend who felt entitled to cheat, and parents who thought protecting his feelings was more important than protecting mine. My dedication to understanding everyone's perspective had left me without anyone willing to understand mine. Not great, I admitted. Right, so maybe it's time to try something different. Maybe it's time to try being angry without immediately trying to transcend it. I don't know how to do that. Lucky for you, I'm an expert. Vida had grown up in a family that expressed emotions directly and dealt with conflict head-on. When someone hurt her, she got mad. When someone disappointed her, she told them. When someone betrayed her trust, she cut them out of her life without a moment of guilt about their emotional growth journey. "Anger is information," she said. "It tells you when someone has crossed a line. And right now, your anger is telling you that your parents crossed a line so far behind them they can't even see it anymore. But what am I supposed to do with that information? Whatever you want. You could confront them. You could cut them off. You could write them a letter. You could slash Ezra's tires." She paused. "Actually, don't slash his tires. I was joking about that part." "What would you do?" "Me? I'd show up at that house and tell them exactly what I think of their choices. But I'm not you. And you get to decide how to handle this." The idea of confronting my parents directly made my stomach clench. I'd been trained my entire life to approach conflict with care, to consider everyone's feelings, to find the compassionate response. The thought of just showing up and expressing pure anger felt like speaking a foreign language. But as the days passed, I found myself getting angrier instead of more understanding. Every therapeutic post Mom shared, every philosophical article Dad posted, every photo Ezra uploaded from my former life felt like salt in a wound that wasn't being allowed to heal. "I think I want to see the apartment again," I told Vida one morning. "The one above the bookstore." "Really? You thinking about taking it?" "Maybe. I can't stay here forever, and I definitely can't go back there." "You can stay here as long as you want," Vida said automatically. "But yeah, your own place might be good for you." Lenny was painting the storefront when we arrived, her silver hair tied back in a bandana and her overalls splattered with fresh green paint. "Well, look who's back," she said when she saw me. "You decide you're ready to stop asking permission to live your life?" "I think so." "Is the apartment still available?" "It is, and it's still perfect for someone who needs to figure out who she is when nobody else is watching." We climbed the narrow stairs to the studio, and I felt the same sense of possibility I'd experienced the first time. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the built-in bookshelves and the small kitchen with its vintage tile. It was tiny, probably smaller than my parents' master bathroom, but it felt like mine in a way no space ever had. "What's the story?" Lenny asked, settling into the window seat and studying my face with the directness I was learning to appreciate. "My ex cheated on me, and my parents invited him to move into my childhood bedroom because they think it would be healing for everyone involved." "Jesus Christ," Lenny said, which was exactly the right response. "Your parents sound like the kind of people who'd give Hitler a participation trophy if he promised to work on his communication skills." I laughed. Actually laughed, for the first time in weeks. "They mean well," I said automatically. "Meaning, well, isn't the same as doing well. You want the place or not?" "I want it. But I should probably tell you that I'm unemployed and heartbroken, and my family has basically disowned me in favor of the man who destroyed my life." "Sounds like you're exactly where you need to be then. Rock bottom is excellent foundation for building something real." She handed me a lease agreement and a pen, and I signed it without reading the fine print, because sometimes you have to jump before you know where you're landing. "First month and deposit," she said. "Move in whenever you want. I'll be downstairs if you need anything, but I won't check on you or offer advice unless you ask for it. You're an adult, and adults get to figure things out for themselves." It was the most respectful thing anyone had said to me in months. Moving my things from Vita's apartment to my new studio took exactly one trip. 2 suitcases, a laptop bag, and a box of books. The entire physical evidence of my 26 years on Earth. It was depressing and liberating in equal measure. "This is perfect," Vida said, helping me arrange my few belongings in the space. "It's like a clean slate. It's like I don't exist. No, it's like you get to decide how to exist. There's a difference." She was right, but the difference felt terrifying. I'd spent so long defining myself in relation to other people, good daughter, supportive girlfriend, helpful friend, that I had no idea who I was when I wasn't performing those roles. That first night alone in my new space, I sat on the Murphy bed and tried to remember the last time I'd been completely alone with my thoughts. Not alone in my childhood bedroom with my parents downstairs, not alone in Ezra's apartment waiting for him to come home, but truly alone with no one else's needs to consider. I couldn't remember. I made myself pasta with jarred sauce and ate it, sitting on the floor by the windows, watching people walk by on the street below. Normal people living normal lives, dealing with normal problems that probably didn't require therapeutic intervention or spiritual bypassing. My phone rang, and I saw Mom's name on the screen. I'd been avoiding her calls for days, but something about the new apartment made me feel brave enough to answer. "Ione, sweetheart, I'm so glad you picked up. I've been worried about you. Have you? Of course I have. You're my daughter, and I love you. I hate that there's this distance between us. You created the distance when you chose Ezra over me. That's not what happened. We're trying to hold space for everyone involved in this situation, including you. By letting him sleep in my bed and eat dinner at my place at the table? By modeling unconditional love and refusing to take sides in a conflict that doesn't really have a villain. My cheating ex-boyfriend wasn't a villain in my mother's therapeutic worldview. He cheated on me, Mom. I know, and I'm so sorry that happened. But people make mistakes when they're struggling with unmet needs and unexpressed emotions. The question is whether we respond with punishment or with an opportunity for growth. What about my needs? What about my emotions? Of course your needs matter, honey. That's why I think it would be so healing for you to come home and work through this together. We could facilitate some really powerful conversations about boundaries and forgiveness. Come home. Where Ezra was sleeping in my bed and my parents were facilitating his emotional growth. I have my own place now, I said. Silence. Oh. Where? Downtown Berkeley, above a bookstore. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Although I do worry about you isolating yourself during such a vulnerable time. I'm not isolating. I'm giving myself space to figure out what I actually think and feel without everyone else's input. But processing difficult emotions in isolation can sometimes lead to rumination and unhealthy thought patterns. It might be better to, Mom, stop. Stop what? Stop analyzing me. Stop trying to optimize my healing process. Stop treating my life like a case study in your therapy practice. I'm not doing that. I'm trying to support you. No, you're trying to manage me. Just like you managed Ezra's breakup with me. Just like you're managing his transition into my bedroom. You're treating all of us like clients instead of people. That's not fair, Ione. I've dedicated my entire career to helping people communicate more effectively and resolve conflicts with compassion. And in the process, you've forgotten how to just be my mother. The words hung in the air between us, and I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. I am your mother, she said finally. Everything I do comes from love. Then why does it feel like betrayal? She didn't have an answer for that, or at least not one she could give without admitting that her love had conditions I'd failed to meet. I should go, I said. Ione, wait. I want you to know that you'll always have a place in this family, no matter what. Your room will be here when you're ready. My room, where Ezra was sleeping. No, it won't, I said. You gave it to someone else. After I hung up, I sat in my new apartment and cried for what felt like hours. Not just for Ezra, not just for my parents, but for the life I'd thought I was living that had turned out to be an illusion. For the family I'd believed would protect me that had chosen to protect someone else instead. For the version of myself that had been so committed to being good and understanding and mature that she'd forgotten to ask what she actually needed. But when I was done crying, something else emerged, something that felt dangerous and unfamiliar, but also necessary. I was angry. Not processing anger or transcending anger or working through anger toward forgiveness. Just angry. And for the first time in my life, that felt exactly right. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under my apartment door while I was sleeping. I almost stepped on it walking to the kitchen. When I saw the careful handwriting addressing Ione Merritt, my first thought was that my parents had decided to communicate through notes instead of phone calls. But the return address said, R. Kale. Rowan, Ezra's sister. I'd met Rowan exactly twice in 2 years of dating her brother. 3 years younger than Ezra, quiet in a way that suggested depth, she'd always hovered on the periphery of his dramatic, artistic life. Both times I saw her, she was visiting for family obligations Ezra treated like chores. I made coffee before opening the letter, delaying the emotional freight I suspected it carried. 3 handwritten pages, folded with care. Dear Ione, I hope It's okay that I'm writing. I got your address from Vita. I asked around until someone connected us. And I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I've been thinking about you since I heard what happened with Ezra. Not just the breakup, but the situation with your parents. I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from anyone connected to him. There are things you should know about my brother, things he probably never told you, things that might help you understand that what happened wasn't about you, even if it felt that way. Ezra has done this before, 3 times that I know of. Sarah in college, Emma in the Bay Area, Chloe right before you. The pattern's always the same. He finds someone generous and supportive, lets them build a life around him, and then when it starts to feel real, he reframes the breakup as spiritual growth. My hands shook. Chloe, just before me. I'd never heard her name. Ezra's genuinely talented, genuinely charming, and genuinely convinced that his emotional habits are signs of artistic depth. He finds people who'll support that story. With Sarah, he cheated during a writing retreat, then said, monogamy stifled creativity. With Emma, it was a spiritual awakening at Burning Man. With Chloe, an artistic breakthrough that required exploring new kinds of intimacy. I thought about Mendocino, about Sage, and Ezra's claim that our relationship had been codependent. The same script, just recycled. What made me write was what your parents did. I think it's unconscionable. My parents have enabled Ezra his whole life. But I never imagined someone else's parents would choose him over their own. Daughter? I think I get it, though. Ezra's very good at presenting as the wounded artist needing support. He probably talked to them about growth and conscious connection, and they probably felt enlightened for housing him during his transition. But he's not growing. He's moving, house to house, heart to heart, collecting people who'll carry him. I'm not telling you this to make you feel worse, but to help you see it wasn't your failure. You were just the latest in a pattern. The reason I know so much is because the other women reached out to me. Sarah, 2 years after their breakup. Emma, when she saw Ezra's engagement to Chloe online. Chloe, when she learned about you. Yes, he was engaged to Chloe. Just a year before you. They all wanted answers. Some explanation for how someone they loved could leave them so completely. Reassurance that they hadn't imagined it. They're all doing well now. Sarah's a teacher, married, to someone who values her. Emma runs her own business and travels. Chloe's studying environmental law. They took the love they gave to Ezra and redirected it toward people and causes that deserved it. Right now, I'm sure it feels like your life's been gutted. Like everything you believed about love and family is broken. But I've seen others come back stronger from Ezra's brand of damage. You deserve better than what Ezra gave you, and better than what your parents are giving you now. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I'm tired of staying silent. Rowan P.S. Ezra and Sage broke up 2 weeks ago. Apparently, she wasn't emotionally evolved enough. He's already seeing someone new. I read the letter 3 times, each pass reframing my entire relationship. Ezra's wisdom about relationships, his therapy speak, the way he'd made me question myself, it hadn't been insight. It was rehearsed. Rowan gave me something I didn't realize I needed, proof I wasn't crazy, that my anger was justified. Called Vita. You need to read this, I said. Can you come over? You sound different. I think I might actually be okay. Vita arrived with bagels and coffee. I handed her the letter. I watched disbelief shift to fury on her face. Holy fucking shit. I know. He's been running this scam for years, and your parents fell for it. They didn't just fall for it. They became part of it. This explains everything. He's not confused. He's a predator. That word felt harsh, but accurate. Ezra didn't hunt. He groomed. I want to show this to my parents. Do you think they'll believe it? That was the question. Would they see past Ezra's charm, or find a way to fit this into his growth journey? At least I'll know where I stand. You want backup? Yeah, I think I do. We drove to Berkeley that afternoon. Rowan's letter was folded in my purse like a weapon. I wasn't hoping to be welcomed back. I was bringing the truth. Mom answered the door, her therapeutic smile faltering when she saw Vida. Ione. Vida. What a surprise. Hi, Mrs. Merritt. Mind if we come in? I'll get some tea. Actually, we just need to talk. Is Dad here? While she fetched him, I looked around the living room of my childhood. The wellness books, the framed quotes. It all looked like a stage set now. Dad appeared, pleased but cautious. They sat on the couch across from us. We've been hoping to heal the distance between us, Mom said. I'm ready to talk, I said. But not about that. I pulled out Rowan's letter and set it on the table. Ezra's sister wrote to me. There are things you need to know. They stared at the letter like it might combust. Sweetheart, Mom said carefully. Reading about Ezra's past may interfere with your healing process. Just read it. Dad read it first. I saw the shift, from curiosity to concern. Then he passed it to Mom. Her mask slipped as she read. This is a lot to take in, she said finally. Is it true? I asked. I don't know. These are serious allegations, but they're coming from someone who might have personal motives. What? Motives? Siblings can carry resentment. I felt something snap. She's describing behavior that matches exactly what he did to me. And you're questioning her motives? I'm trying to stay objective. No, you're protecting your choice to take him in. Dad cleared his throat. Even if it's accurate, it doesn't change our commitment to support him. You mean to support the man who cheated on me and moved into my bedroom? He's navigating a difficult transition. This isn't a mistake. It's a pattern. At what point do mistakes become choices? Mom and Dad shared a look. We appreciate you sharing this, Mom said. We'll take it into consideration. You'll consider it? We'll talk to Ezra, get his perspective. You're going to ask the manipulator if he's manipulative? We believe in giving everyone a chance to respond. I stood up. Do you hear yourselves? Your daughter brings you evidence, and you're more worried about being fair to him. We're trying to avoid rushing to judgment. No, you're trying not to admit you were wrong. You chose him over me. The silence was deafening. Finally, Mom said, You're in pain. It's clouding your perception. No, I see everything clearly. That's the problem. I picked up Rowan's letter. When you're ready to choose your daughter over the man who destroyed her, you know where to find me. We walked out without another word. And as we drove away, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't hoping they'd change. I was choosing myself. The weeks following my parents' dismissal of Rowan's letter were the strangest of my life. Not because anything dramatic happened. Quite the opposite. For the first time since the whole disaster began, my life became quiet, predictable, mine. I developed routines that belonged only to me. Coffee at sunrise by my apartment windows, writing at the small desk I'd bought from a thrift store, long walks through Berkeley without checking my phone. I started freelancing more seriously, taking on projects that actually interested me instead of just paying bills. I even began working on my novel again, the one I'd abandoned when managing Ezra's emotional needs became a full-time job. But underneath the growing sense of peace was something else building, a clarity that felt dangerous and necessary in equal measure. 3 weeks after showing my parents Rowan's letter, I got a text from an unknown number. Hi, this is Sarah. Rowan gave me your number. Are you free for coffee sometime? I'd love to meet you. Sarah. Ezra's first victim, according to Rowan's letter. The one who'd called looking for answers years after their relationship ended. We met at a cafe in Oakland, and I recognized her, immediately despite never having seen her before. She had the same look I'd been wearing for months, someone recovering from having their reality systematically dismantled by a person they'd trusted completely. You're exactly what I expected, she said, settling into the chair across from me. Ezra definitely has a type. What type is that? Smart, generous, a little naive about how manipulative people can be. Someone who'll assume the best about his motives even when his actions suggest otherwise. Sarah was 30 now, 4 years removed from her relationship with Ezra, and had the perspective that only comes from distance and therapy. Rowan said you called her a couple years ago looking for answers, I said. I did. I was still trying to understand how someone I'd loved could throw me away so completely. But talking to Rowan helped me see that it wasn't really about me at all. How did you get over it? Honestly, I got angry first. Really, properly angry. Probably for the first time in my life. And then I used that anger to build boundaries I'd never had before. What did you do with the anger? Sarah smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. I made sure his next girlfriend knew what she was getting into. You warned Emma? I tried to. She didn't believe me at first. He'd already convinced her that I was his toxic ex who couldn't handle his growth. But I planted seeds, and when he started pulling the same patterns with her, she remembered what I'd said. Did Rowan tell you about my parents? She did. That's actually why I wanted to meet you. I've been thinking about your situation, and I have an idea that might interest you. What kind of idea? Ezra is having a gallery opening next week. His first solo show. Apparently, your parents helped him connect with the gallery owner through their network. My parents had helped him get a gallery show. While I was sleeping on couches and rebuilding my life from scratch, they were advancing his artistic career. I wouldn't normally suggest this, Sarah continued. But sometimes people need to see the pattern laid out clearly before they can understand what they're enabling. What are you suggesting? Emma and Chloe are both in the Bay Area. Rowan's flying up from LA. We were thinking about attending his opening as a group. All of his exes showing up at his art opening? Not to cause a scene or anything dramatic. Just to be present, to be visible, to let him know that his actions have consequences he can't therapize away. The idea was simultaneously terrifying and appealing. Part of me wanted to hide from anything connected to Ezra, to build my new life as far from his influence as possible. But another part, the part that had been growing stronger since I'd started choosing myself, wanted him to face what he'd done. Would my parents be there? Probably. Rowan said he's been posting about it on social media, talking about how grateful he is for his chosen family supporting his artistic vision. Chosen family. He'd replaced me with my own parents and was calling them his chosen family. I need to think about it, I said. Of course, but Ione, whatever you decide, you should know that you're not alone in this. What he did to you, what your parents are doing, it's not normal, and it's not your fault. I left the cafe with Sarah's phone number and a choice to make. I could continue building my quiet new life, staying clear of the drama and manipulation that had defined my old one. Or I could face the people who'd chosen to believe his version of reality over mine. That night, I called Vita. They want me to go to Ezra's gallery opening, I said without preamble. Who's they? I explained about Sarah, about the plan to show up as a united front of women who'd seen through Ezra's patterns. Holy shit, Vita said when I finished. That's either the most empowering thing I've ever heard, or a recipe for complete disaster. I know, I can't decide which. What does your gut tell you? I thought about it honestly. My gut told me that I was tired of hiding, tired of being the only one who'd suffered consequences for Ezra's choices, tired of watching him be celebrated while I rebuilt my life in secret. It tells me I want to go. Then you should go. And I'm coming with you. Vita, nope. You're not walking into that situation alone. I'll be your backup. The decision, once made, felt both terrifying and inevitable. I spent the week preparing, not by planning what I'd say or rehearsing confrontations, but by getting grounded in my own truth. I wrote in my journal, talked, to Lenny about strength and boundaries, and reminded myself that I deserved to take up space in the world. The night before the opening, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my parents, about how they'd react to seeing me there. Would they be embarrassed? Defensive? Would they finally understand what they'd chosen to support? At 3 a.m, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Ezra's opening is tomorrow night. We're so proud to support his artistic journey. We hope someday you'll be able to celebrate his growth too. They were proud to support his artistic journey. They hoped I'd celebrate his growth. I screenshotted the message and sent it to Sarah, Emma, and Chloe in the group chat we'd started. The responses were immediate. Sarah: growth. Right. Emma: I can't believe they sent that to you. Chloe: see you tomorrow night. Rowan texted separately. My flight lands at 4. Ready to do this? I was ready. More ready than I'd been for anything. In months. The gallery was in downtown Oakland, a converted warehouse space with exposed brick and industrial lighting that screamed serious art venue. I arrived with Vita at 7, an hour after the opening started, wearing a black dress that made me feel powerful and red lipstick that felt like war paint. The space was crowded with the usual art opening crowd, people holding wine glasses and speaking in low voices about composition and emotional resonance. Ezra's paintings covered the walls, abstract pieces that he'd probably described as explorations of authentic intimacy and human connection. I spotted him immediately, standing near a large canvas and gesturing animatedly to a small group of admirers. He looked exactly the same, tall, dark-haired, wearing the kind of carefully disheveled artist uniform that took 20 minutes to achieve. But something about seeing him in person again felt different than I'd expected. Smaller somehow. Less significant. There's your parents, Vita said quietly, nodding toward the back of the gallery. Mom and Dad stood near the wine table, looking exactly like the kind of progressive parents who'd support a young artist through his creative journey. Mom wore a flowing dress and elaborate jewelry, Dad his usual corduroy jacket with leather elbow patches. They looked proud, satisfied, like they were exactly where they belonged. You okay? Vita asked. Yeah. Actually, yeah, I think I am. Sarah appeared beside us as if summoned. She looked confident, professional, completely at ease. Emma and Chloe are here, she said. And Rowan just walked in. I looked around and spotted them. Emma near the entrance, examining a painting with the expression of someone who knew exactly what she was looking at. Chloe by the wine table, close enough to my parents that they'd probably already noticed. Her, and Rowan standing just inside the door, surveying the room with the same directness I'd seen in her letter. Is this really happening? I asked. Only if you want it to, Sarah said. We can still leave. You don't owe anyone a confrontation. But I didn't want to leave. Looking around the gallery, at Ezra holding court, at my parents beaming with pride, at the women he'd discarded standing quietly around the edges, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, complete clarity about what was right. I want to do this, I said. Okay, then let's go remind everyone that artists aren't the only ones with stories to tell. We moved through the gallery slowly, not as a group, but as individuals who happened to be in the same space. I watched Ezra's face as he began to notice familiar figures in his audience. First Rowan, which made him frown with confusion. Then Emma, which made him look uncomfortable. Then Chloe, which made him step back from his admirers and scan the room more carefully. When his eyes found me, his entire body went still. I raised my wine glass slightly in his direction, not a toast, but an acknowledgement. A simple gesture that said, I see you, I know who you are, and I'm not hiding anymore. The color drained from his face. My parents noticed me a moment later. Mom's expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been shame before settling on determined optimism. Dad just looked tired, like he'd been expecting this confrontation and dreading it in equal measure. "Ione," Mom said, making her way over to me. "What a surprise. I didn't know you were interested in attending art openings." "I'm interested in a lot of things these days," I said, "including supporting the arts community." "That's wonderful. I think you'll really appreciate Ezra's new work. It's all about transformation and authentic self-expression." "I'm sure it is." Dad joined us, looking between me and Vida like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Vida, good to see you again," he said with forced politeness. "Professor Merritt," Vida replied with a smile that could have cut glass. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment, and I realized my parents had no idea how to handle this situation. Their therapeutic training had prepared them for managing conflicts in controlled environments, not for dealing with the consequences of their choices in public spaces. "I should probably mingle," I said. "See what everyone's talking about." I walked away before they could respond, feeling their eyes on my back as I moved through the crowd. Near the center of the gallery, I found myself standing in front of a large painting that looked familiar. Not the style, but the subject matter. It was an abstract representation of two figures separating, painted in blues and grays with sharp lines that suggested broken connections. "It's called conscious uncoupling," a voice said behind me. I turned to find Ezra, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Interesting title," I said. "Ione, I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm sure you didn't." "Look, I know things ended badly between us, but I hope you can see that I was trying to handle everything with as much integrity as possible." Integrity. He was still using the same words, still telling the same story. Is that what you call it? I call it being honest about my needs and limitations instead of staying in a situation that wasn't serving either of us. And Sage? Was sleeping with her part of being honest about your needs? His jaw tightened. That situation was complicated. I'm sure it was, just like it was complicated with Sarah and Emma and Chloe. I watched recognition dawn on his face as he realized why so many familiar figures were scattered throughout his opening. "I don't know what they've told you," he said carefully, "but every relationship is different. You can't just... Actually, according to them, every relationship was exactly the same. Same patterns, same language, same ending. The only thing that changed was the woman getting discarded. That's not fair. Those relationships ended for different reasons. Did they? Because it sounds like they all ended the same way. With you. Finding someone new, and then convincing everyone that leaving was a sign of growth, rather than a pattern of behavior. I could see him trying to find the therapeutic language that would reframe this conversation, that would make me the unreasonable one for bringing up his past. "I think you're processing a lot of pain right now," he said finally. "And that's making it hard for you to see the bigger picture." "The bigger picture? You mean the one where you move from woman to woman, taking what you need and discarding them when they start expecting basic loyalty? Ione, or the one where you convince their families to support you through your transition while they rebuild their lives alone? Your parents are amazing people who... My parents are amazing people who chose to support someone who betrayed their daughter instead of supporting their daughter. And you know what? That's on them. But it's also on you for manipulating them into that choice." People around us were starting to notice our conversation, drawn by the tension that was becoming impossible to ignore. "I never manipulated anyone," Ezra said, his voice getting defensive. "I've always been completely honest about my process." "Your process, right?" I looked around the gallery, at the paintings that probably told the story of his journey from me to Sage to whoever came next. "Well, your process is about to get a lot more complicated." "What do you mean?" I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a kind expression. "I mean you're about to learn what happens when the women you discarded stop staying silent about your patterns." The conversation was building towards something I'd been avoiding for months, not just confronting Ezra, but confronting the entire system that had protected him while abandoning me. And as I looked around the gallery at my parents, at the women he'd hurt, at the art community celebrating his transformation, I realized I was ready for whatever came next. What happened next unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance that no one had rehearsed, but everyone somehow knew the steps too. Sarah approached first, appearing beside me as if she'd been waiting for exactly this moment. "Ezra," she said with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth, "your work has really evolved since I knew you, though the themes seem remarkably consistent." His face went pale. "Sarah, I didn't know you were... What are you doing here?" "Supporting local artists, of course. I'm particularly interested in this piece." She gestured toward the painting behind us. "Conscious uncoupling. Tell me about your inspiration for it." It explores the complexity of human relationships and how we can separate with love instead of blame. How enlightened. Emma's voice joined the conversation as she materialized on Ezra's other side. "Though I have to ask, is this from personal experience or more of a theoretical exploration?" Now Ezra looked genuinely panicked. His head swiveled between the three of us like he was watching a tennis match, and I could see him trying to calculate an escape route. "Emma, This is unexpected. I'm sure it is. Chloe, come see this fascinating piece about conscious uncoupling." Chloe drifted over with the casual confidence of someone who'd stopped caring what anyone thought of her presence. She was smaller than I'd expected, with bright red hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd learned to trust her own perceptions above all else. "Ezra," she said simply. "Still exploring emotional authenticity through your art, I see. This is..." He looked around the gallery as if searching for someone to rescue him. "This is really inappropriate. Tonight is about my work, not about dredging up the past." "Your work is about the past," I said. "Your work is about the women you've left behind, and the story you tell yourself about why leaving them was actually a gift." A small crowd was gathering around us now, drawn by the visible tension and the increasingly obvious dynamic playing out. I could see gallery patrons exchanging glances, trying to figure out what they were witnessing. "I think we should take this somewhere private," Ezra said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Why?" Rowan's voice cut through the tension as she joined our circle. "You've been very public about your growth journey. Surely you don't mind discussing it with the people who experienced it firsthand." Seeing his sister among his accusers seemed to break something in Ezra. The carefully maintained artist persona cracked, and underneath was someone much younger and more frightened than I'd ever seen. "Rowan, what the hell are you doing?" "What I should have done years ago. Standing with the women you've hurt instead of making excuses for your behavior. You don't understand the complexity of these relationships. You don't know what really happened. I know that you've used the same script to end 4 different relationships in 5 years, Rowan said calmly. I know that you've convinced multiple families to support you through your transitions while your ex-girlfriends rebuilt their lives alone. And I know that you're still telling yourself the same story about being too evolved for conventional commitment. The crowd around us was growing larger, and I could see my parents pushing through the group, their faces set with the particular determination of people preparing to manage a crisis. "Ione," Mom said when she reached us, her voice carrying the forced calm of a hostage negotiator. "Perhaps we could step outside and discuss whatever's happening here in a more appropriate setting." "What's happening here," Sarah said before I could respond, "is that your house guest is being confronted with the consequences of his patterns." Dad's academic instincts kicked in, and he studied the women surrounding Ezra with the expression of someone trying to solve a fascinating puzzle. "Are you all," he began. "Ex-girlfriends," Emma supplied helpfully, all discarded using remarkably similar language about growth and authenticity and conscious separation. "That's not," Mom started, then stopped, looking between Ezra and the four women facing him. "This seems like a very charged situation." "It is charged," I said, "because some situations deserve to be charged. Some actions deserve consequences." "Ione, I think your anger is understandable, but publicly confronting Ezra at his opening isn't going to heal anything," Mom said. "I'm not here to heal anything. I'm here to tell the truth." "Whose truth?" Dad asked, and I could see him slipping into professor mode, ready to analyze the epistemological complexity of competing narratives. "Our truth," Chloe said firmly. "The truth of what it's like to love someone who's incapable of loving anyone back. The truth of what it's like to be discarded and then told it's for your own good. The truth of what it's like to have your own family choose your abuser over you because he speaks their language," I added, looking directly at my parents. Mom flinched. "Ione, that's not what happened." "Isn't it? You took in the man who cheated on me, gave him my bedroom, supported his artistic career, and told me I needed to work on forgiving him. How would you describe that?" "We were trying to model unconditional love and support someone through a difficult transition." "You were enabling a predator," Sarah said bluntly. "That's a very serious accusation," Dad said, his academic training making him recoil from such direct language. "It's a very serious pattern," Emma replied. "And it's one your daughter had every right to warn you about." "We read Rowan's letter," Mom said defensively. "We discussed it with Ezra, and he provided context for those previous relationships that helped us understand the complexity of the situations involved." "What context?" Rowan asked sharply. "Each of those relationships ended for different reasons, and while Ezra acknowledges that he could have handled some things better, he's grown significantly from those experiences." "He told you Sarah was mentally unstable, didn't he?" Chloe said. "That Emma was too controlling? That I was emotionally manipulative?" The way my parents' faces changed told us everything we needed to know. "He told you we were all crazy," I said, feeling the final piece of the puzzle click into place. He explained away his pattern by diagnosing all his ex-girlfriends with psychological problems. "That's not," Mom began. "What exactly did he tell you about me?" Sarah asked. "About why our relationship ended." "He said you had some attachment. Issues that made it difficult for you to accept his need for independence," Dad answered reluctantly. Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Attachment issues. Right. And Emma?" "He said she struggled with jealousy and control," Mom admitted. "And Chloe?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "He said she had difficulty with emotional regulation and couldn't handle the intensity of their connection." "Jesus Christ," Vida said from somewhere behind me. I'd forgotten she was there, but her outrage reminded me that normal people who hadn't been trained to see every human failing as a growth opportunity, could recognize manipulation when they saw it. "Don't you see?" I asked my parents. "He gave you the same explanation for every relationship. Every woman who didn't accept his betrayal had a psychological problem. Every woman who got angry about being cheated on was emotionally unstable." "That doesn't mean," Mom started. "What did he tell you about me?" I interrupted. "When he called to get advice on breaking up with me? What was my psychological deficiency?" The silence stretched between us, and I could see my parents realizing they'd walked into a trap of their own making. "He said you had trouble with emotional boundaries," Dad said finally, "that you'd become codependent and needed space to develop a healthier sense of self." Codependent. The same word he'd used with me, the same therapeutic language my mother had been parroting for weeks. So I was codependent, Sarah had attachment issues, Emma was controlling, and Chloe couldn't regulate her emotions. Do you see the pattern? "People can have similar relationship challenges," Mom began. "Or one person can be very good at pathologizing normal emotional responses to betrayal," Rowan interrupted. "The fact is," Ezra said suddenly, his voice louder than necessary, "these relationships ended badly, and I'm sorry about that. But I've been in therapy, I've been working on myself, and I'm not the same person I was during those relationships." "Really?" Sarah asked. "When did you start therapy?" "I've been seeing someone for the past few months." "And before that?" I worked on myself in other ways, through my art, through spiritual practice." "So you weren't in therapy when you broke up with Ione?" "No, but..." "Or when you broke up with Chloe?" "The work I do on myself doesn't always happen in traditional therapeutic settings." "Right," Emma said. "Your work on yourself happened by moving from woman to woman and convincing their families that they were the problem." By now, the entire gallery had gone quiet, and every conversation in the space had stopped. Ezra's big moment, his artistic triumph, had become a public reckoning with his personal history. "This is completely inappropriate," he said, his voice rising. "This is my opening, and you're disrupting it with personal grievances that have nothing to do with my art." "Your art is about your personal relationships," I said. "You've built your entire artistic identity around processing your emotional journey. You don't get to claim they're separate when the women you've hurt show up to tell their side of the story." "I think," the gallery owner said, appearing suddenly at the edge of our circle. "Perhaps we should let them finish," someone from the crowd called out. "This is the most honest conversation about art and relationships I've heard all year." I looked around and realized that the gallery patrons weren't uncomfortable with our confrontation. They were engaged by it. Some were nodding in recognition. Others were watching with the fascination of people witnessing a long overdue reckoning. "The thing is," I said, loud enough for the entire gallery to hear, "Ezra is a talented artist. He really is. But his talent doesn't excuse his pattern of using women for emotional and financial support, and then discarding them when they expect basic loyalty. And it doesn't excuse the families and communities that enable him," Sarah added, looking directly at my parents. "We didn't enable anything," Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You took him in after he betrayed your daughter," Chloe said. "You gave him emotional support while she rebuilt her life alone. You helped advance his career while she slept on couches. How is that not enabling? We were trying to model forgiveness and compassion. Toward everyone except your own daughter," Emma pointed out. I watched my parents' faces as the weight of their choices settled over them. For the first time since this whole disaster began, they looked uncertain, like their carefully constructed framework for handling human relationships might have significant flaws. "Ione," Dad said quietly, "we never meant to choose anyone over you. But you did choose. When you decided his growth was more important than my pain. When you decided his housing needs were more important than my emotional safety. When you decided his version of events was more credible than mine. We thought we were doing the right thing." "For who?" "Because it wasn't the right thing for me." The gallery had gone completely silent, except for the sound of my voice carrying across the space. "You taught me to believe in justice and fairness, and standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. But when I needed you to stand up for me, you stood up for the person who hurt me instead." Mom was crying now, the kind of tears that come when someone's worldview crumbles in public. "We love you," she said. "We've always loved you. I know you love me, but love without loyalty isn't enough. Love without protection isn't enough. Love that requires me to forgive and understand and grow while everyone else gets excused for their behavior isn't enough." I looked around the gallery one more time, at Ezra, who'd finally run out of therapeutic language to explain away his actions, at my parents, who were finally seeing the cost of their choices, at the women who'd stood with me to tell a truth that no one had wanted to hear. "I'm not here for apologies or promises to do better," I said. "I'm here because I'm tired of being the only one who faced consequences for Ezra's actions. I'm tired of hiding while he gets celebrated. And I'm tired of pretending that what happened to me was normal or acceptable, or something I should be grateful for. "So what do you want?" Ezra asked, and for the first time all evening, he sounded like himself, small and frightened and completely out of his depth. "I want you to stop," I said simply. "I want you to stop telling yourself that your pattern of behavior is spiritual growth. I want you to stop convincing families to support you through your transitions. And I want you to get actual help instead of using women as therapy. And if I don't," I looked at Sarah, Emma, Chloe, and Rowan. These women who'd found each other through shared damage and chosen to stand together instead of staying silent. "Then we'll be here," I said. "Every opening, every show, every time you try to build a career on the wreckage of other people's lives. We'll be here to tell the truth about what that success cost. The silence that followed felt different from the ones that had come before. Not the silence of people processing information or trying to find the right therapeutic response, but the silence of people recognizing that something fundamental had just shifted. "I think," the gallery owner said finally, "perhaps it's time to wrap up this evening." People began to move toward the exits, but slowly, as if they didn't want to miss what might happen next. I realized I didn't know what would happen next either. I'd done what I came to do, told the truth in front of everyone who'd chosen to ignore it. But I had no idea what the aftermath would look like. My parents approached me as the crowd thinned, both of them looking older than they had an hour ago. "Ione," Mom said. "Could we talk? Privately?" I looked at Vita, who nodded, and at the other women, who were gathering near the entrance like a protective honor guard. "You can say whatever you need to say here," I said. "I'm done with private conversations that protect other people's comfort over my well-being." Dad nodded slowly, as if he'd expected that response. "You're right," he said. "About all of it. We made choices that prioritized Ezra's needs over yours, and we told ourselves it was about being fair when it was really about avoiding conflict. We wanted to be the kind of people who could rise above petty grievances and model unconditional love," Mom added. "But we lost sight of the fact that our first obligation was to protect our daughter." It was closer to an apology than I'd expected, but it still felt incomplete. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we ask Ezra to find somewhere else to live," Dad said. "And we figure out how to rebuild a relationship with our daughter." "If you want that," Mom added quickly. "If you're willing to try." I thought about it honestly. The anger that had sustained me for months was still there, but underneath it was something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but the possibility of something different. "I'm willing to try," I said finally. "But things can't go back to the way they were. I can't go back to being the family's emotional manager while everyone else gets excused for their behavior." "We understand," Dad said. "Do you? Because this isn't just about Ezra. This is about the way our family works, the way you've taught me to prioritize everyone else's comfort over my own well-being. We want to do better," Mom said. "We want to learn how to be the parents you deserve." It was a start. Not enough, but a start. As we walked out of the gallery together, me and Vita, my parents trailing behind, the other women forming a loose group around us, I realized something had fundamentally changed. Not just in my relationship with my family, but in my understanding of what I deserved and what I was willing to accept. The woman who'd walked into that gallery was different from the one who'd received Ezra's breakup call months ago. She was angrier, but also clearer, more demanding, but also more honest. Less willing to manage other people's emotions, but more committed to honoring her own. "So," Vita said as we stepped out into the cool Oakland night, "how do you feel?" I looked back at the gallery, where Ezra was probably explaining to the remaining patrons how he'd been ambushed by unstable ex-girlfriends, and forward at the street where my new life was waiting. "Free," I said. "I feel free." 3 months later, I was at my writing desk in the apartment above the bookstore, finally making progress on a chapter that had eluded me, when my phone rang. It was my mother. We'd been talking more since the gallery night, slowly rebuilding something more honest than before. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. "How's the writing?" "Good. I think I finally figured out how to end this chapter. I've been telling everyone about my daughter, the writer. That simple pride still caught me off guard. Our conversations used to feel like therapy sessions, so her unfiltered warmth felt revolutionary. "How are things there?" I asked. "Quiet. Your father's grading finals. I'm between clients. The house feels like ours again." Ezra had moved out a week after the gallery show, crashing on a friend's couch in San Francisco while he figured things out. According to Rowan, that had included getting a new girlfriend, a ceramicist who saw his growth potential. "Have you heard from him?" I asked. "No, and I don't expect to. I think we all need space to process what happened. We'd stopped sugarcoating what happened. No more vague spiritual bypassing. Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you take his side over mine?" The real reason. I'd avoided asking, afraid of the answer, or afraid she wasn't ready to give it. "Because he made us feel like good people," she said. "Like we were the kind of parents who could rise above things and model unconditional love. Supporting him made us feel evolved. And supporting me meant picking sides, admitting there was a right and a wrong. It challenged the story we told ourselves about being fair and balanced. I let her honesty sink in. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you for letting me figure it out. I couldn't see it clearly while it was happening." We chatted a bit longer about Dad's sabbatical, a new client, spring garden plans. Normal conversation that felt sacred because it was so normal. After we hung up, I looked around my apartment. A Murphy bed, tiny kitchen, bookshelves I'd filled myself. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Fully mine. That evening, Lenny knocked. As always, she came with a bottle of wine and 4 decades worth of defiant wisdom. "How's family therapy?" she asked, settling into her usual chair. "Better. Slower than I thought. But better. Healing. Takes longer than we want it to. Especially when you're rewriting old stories. Sometimes I wonder if I should have just cut them off and started over." "Probably would have been easier," she said. "But easy isn't the same as worthwhile. You're learning. So are they. What am I learning? That you can love people and still protect yourself. That boundaries aren't walls, and that being a good daughter doesn't mean being invisible. As always, she was right. The relationship I was building with my parents wasn't perfect, but it was real. "Speaking of learning," she said, handing me a newspaper clipping. It was a review from the San Francisco Chronicle, a group show featuring Ezra. Ezra Cale's contribution feels oddly hollow, despite clear technical skill. His paintings on emotional growth seem performative, more interested in appearing evolved than examining real patterns. The work lacks vulnerability. "Looks like people are seeing through it," Lenny said. I read it twice, waiting for satisfaction. But what I felt was indifference. Ezra's success or failure wasn't my concern anymore. "I don't think I care," I said, surprised. "Good. That's how you know you're healing, when his failures stop feeling like your victories." A month later, Sarah invited me to her wedding. She was marrying the teacher Rowan had mentioned. The ceremony was small and joyful, and I ended up seated with Emma, Chloe, and Rowan, the women who stood with me that night. "It's weird," Emma said, watching Sarah dance. "Seeing what healthy love looks like." "I keep waiting for her to apologize or start managing his feelings," Chloe added. "She doesn't have to," Rowan said. "That's the difference." I thought about my dating life, non-existent not because I was heartbroken, but because I was learning to enjoy my own company. The idea of sharing this life I was building felt like a choice now, not a necessity. "Are you seeing anyone?" Emma asked, not yet. I'm still figuring out who I am when I'm not caretaking. And I'm starting to like her. We laughed, but it was true. The woman I was becoming, more honest, more demanding, unapologetically present, was someone I genuinely liked. Back at my apartment, I finished the chapter I'd been stuck on. It was about a woman who chooses herself after a lifetime of choosing others. For the first time, I felt like I was telling a story only I could tell. My phone buzzed with a text from Vida. "Proud of you. See you tomorrow for hiking?" "Yes," I typed. "Thank you for being my friend through all of this. Thank you for letting me." "Love you," she replied. I turned off my phone and looked around. 6 months ago, I'd been in my childhood bedroom, clinging to a future that was a lie. Now, I was building a life on truth, where love didn't demand self-erasure, where my needs mattered. I opened my laptop and started the next chapter, about a woman who was no longer the victim, but the heroine of her own story. Outside, Berkeley buzzed with life. Cars, footsteps, city sounds. It was the sound of a world that had room for me in it, especially for someone who'd had to fight to belong. And that's what I was doing now. Not telling the story of being betrayed, but the story of saving myself. A much better story. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.